just to satisfy his twisted obsession. Zhongshan used the excuse of fetching water to slip into the girls' dormitory, and while the girls were busy showering, he hid inside the water room next door, waiting in complete silence. But he wasn't there to spy on anyone bathing. He was waiting for the real voyeur to appear, because in his past life, a brutal case had taken place in this exact school. That day, a voyeur had broken into the bathhouse, and when the students spotted him, he panicked and ran. Zhongshan had once been right there with a chance to stop the incoming tragedy, but all he felt back then was fear. The man had rushed into the girls' bathroom and ravaged one of the girls, and after being satisfied, the bastard slaughtered her, and the incident soon faded from everyone's memory except his. It became an eternal nightmare that stuck with him. He couldn't even graduate afterward. He dropped out and enlisted in the army, and even after joining the special forces, he kept getting warned for breaking discipline. The fury burning inside him never faded because he couldn't understand how those monsters who ruined people's lives walked around without consequences. Over time, people started calling him the Lone Wolf. Eventually, during a raid on a crime syndicate, his own teammates betrayed him. The entire squad was wiped out, and even he was stabbed to death by the traitor. But his unwilling spirit wasn't finished yet, and he was suddenly given another chance. Reborn 10 years earlier. Zhongshan froze on the peeping spot with his mind completely blank, and when someone checked on him, he froze. The nerd blurted out excuses, insisting he wasn't doing anything perverted, and just reacted because the MC had been standing still for too long. The student, irritated, pointed out that he was obviously a student too. Zhongshan grabbed the boy's shoulder and demanded the date, and the answer came back as April 13th, 2015. The boy with glasses stared at him like he needed counseling before leaving with his classmates. Zhongshan looked at his own reflection in the mirror, stunned, and couldn't believe what he was seeing until he slapped himself and felt the sharp sting. It was all real. Since he was alive again, the ones who would die this time would be those bastards. Just then, a group of girls walked over, chatting about celebrities. Hearing their voices, he turned, and a blonde girl snapped at him, calling him creepy and mocking him for standing there with a nosebleed. Another girl added that they were talking about Jackie and didn't need him muttering at the restroom door. They decided to just go shower, and as he watched them walk away, he suddenly remembered today's date. It was April 13th, the day something terrible had happened in his previous life, and if he was going to rewrite his entire fate, it had to begin here. With that realization hitting him hard, he picked up his water kettle and stepped straight into the girls' dormitory. Our MC scanned the windows carefully and found nothing out of place, then paused at the doorway and asked for permission to enter so he could fetch water, since the teaching building supply had been cut off again. The girl inside complained about the water being cut again and cursed the lousy school and warned him not to look around. Inside the water room, our boy filled his kettle while keeping a strict track of time, remembering that this was the exact place where he had once failed to save a girl, a regret that had tormented him for 10 long years. This time, he wasn't going to let history repeat itself. Suddenly, a sharp scream echoed through the hallway. A girl cried for help, shouting that some creep was peeking at the girls in the shower. Zhongshan immediately turned toward the sound and walked straight into the chaos. A group of girls were yelling at a man, telling others not to let him escape. Their anger sent the man into a frenzy, and in the next moment he pulled out a knife, threatening everyone and telling them to back off if they didn't want to die. Zhongshan picked up his kettle and hurled it at the man with a heavy crack, the scalding water splashing across his face. The man shrieked in pain and swore he would kill whoever attacked him, but before this shit could finish, Zhongshan rushed forward and slammed a hard kick into his skull. The man stumbled backward and fell but scrambled up again, swinging the knife wildly. Zhongshan dodged with ease, grabbed his wrist, and twisted until the man screamed and the blade clattered to the floor. The boy raised his leg and delivered another brutal kick straight into the man's head, knocking him down completely unconscious. But the MC didn't stop. 10 years of rage exploded through him as he pounded the man's face again and again until the front teeth shattered, the nose collapsed, and the swelling turned the man's face into a grotesque pig's head. When the man finally slurred through broken teeth and begged him to stop before he died, the boy's fury slowly began to fade. A soft, timid voice broke the moment. The boy looked up and froze when he saw the very girl who had been murdered in his previous life. Her cheeks were flushed as she told him gently that she knew he was being brave, but that his intense stare was making her embarrassed. Her words hit something deep inside him. Moments later, the police arrived and hauled the beaten man into the patrol car. One officer looked at Zhongshan with surprise, noting how impressive it was for a kid to take down an armed criminal bare-handed, and how the joint lock he used looked incredibly professional, like serious training. Zhongshan replied calmly that he had picked it up from TV, calling them fancy moves. The officer scoffed that even regular scouts didn't learn techniques like that, and questioned how a kid could handle the situation so well if he learned everything from TV. He suddenly lunged at the boy to test him, but Zhang Shan didn't flinch. He just stared back with ice-cold intensity, and the officer froze where he stood as sweat trickled down his face, overwhelmed by the killing intent radiating from the boy. The MC pointed out coldly that choking civilians wasn't exactly proper for an officer. The rescued girl tugged at the officer's sleeve, asking him not to make things complicated for her classmate, and promising to testify that the creep had pulled the knife first. But the officer still pointed out that even so, he couldn't beat a man half to death. A short while later, the MC stepped into his home and saw his mother sitting at the dinner table. She pointed out how late it was, how the dinner had already gone cold, and how they had waited for him without knowing where he had run off. She complained that even his school bag was missing, and scolded him for acting nothing like a student, blaming his father for spoiling him and giving him all these bad habits while telling him to wash his hands. Hearing that familiar nagging voice, the boy suddenly lost control and hugged her tightly, which made her worry if someone had bullied him and try to calm him as he cried. Once they sat down, his mother noticed how strange he seemed and asked if he was unwell or stressed from studying. The boy choked up and reassured her that he was fine and promised that from then on, he would always listen to her. She responded that she would just be happy if he stopped giving her headaches and told him that no one expected him to become a big shot, that finishing school was enough because his father would help him find a stable job in a government office. Listening to her endless nagging filled his chest with warmth. After dinner, Zhang Shan lay on his bed and sighed, thinking about how nostalgic it felt to live days without worrying about bullets tearing through his skull. He thought about how ordinary people had to give everything just to protect a small piece of happiness, while villains could ruin everything so easily. Now that he had been reborn again, he intended to change this world and leave no regrets behind. The next morning, he arrived at school, where even the old gatekeeper gave him a thumbs up. Senior class girls who once looked down on him now whispered with interest, commenting on how he was Zhang Shan from class 15, noticing that he looked kind of handsome, and talking excitedly about how cool he had seemed while fighting yesterday, and even the principal planned to give him an award. Hearing even the director say that left him speechless, because he never expected helping someone to create such a stir. When he reached the classroom door, he heard his classmates gossiping about him like he had kicked doors down and thrown punches like sandbags in some dramatic movie scene. A bald boy approached him, hyped about how insane his moves were and comparing them to Chong Wei beating Lai Fu. The MC casually asked if he wanted to learn and offered to teach him, which the boy accepted excitedly like he was calling him Godfather. Their chatter irritated Yang Tianlei, who accused him of showing off after one fight and walked over with his sidekick to demand the English homework from the last day. The MC handed it over casually, and Yang tore it to pieces with a sneer, ordering him to rewrite it. His deskmate jumped up in anger and demanded to know why Yang had ripped it, but Yang smirked and told him to rewrite it 10 times and submit it by the end of the day. The bald guy called it picking a fight, but Yang's sidekick cut him off and called him a monkey for interrupting. As the tension grew, the MC stopped his friend and agreed to rewrite it, but said Yang would have to apologize. Yang scoffed at the idea, and the MC's voice turned cold as he told him it was for that cheap backbone of his. Yang's lackey got fired up and threw a punch at the MC. The boy dodged easily, but a passing girl was suddenly in the path of the fist. In a split second, the MC lunged forward and pulled her aside, though her nose still got grazed by that pighead bastard. His eyes hardened as he declared that the lackey had gone too far, and that a hand harming the innocent didn't deserve to stay whole. He twisted the lackey's arm into a grappling hold and wrenched sharply until a sickening crack echoed, and the boy's arm snapped. Seeing his lackey defeated, Yang grabbed a bench and swung it at the MC, but Zhang Shan, once a special forces captain, had already predicted the move. He spun around, locked Yang's neck, and drove his fist toward him. At that moment, a furious shout erupted from a fat-ass teacher, calling the situation outrageous and accusing Zhang Shan of being addicted to fighting and acting like the school belonged to him. The girl immediately stepped forward, trying to explain that it was Han Chong-ho, but the man cut her off and demanded silence before ordering Zhang Shan to the office. Yang Tianli wore a smug grin as he watched. In the office, the director scolded him and questioned why he had clashed head-on with Yang Tianli. The MC shot back coldly, saying that he was supposed to endure it while being provoked. The director sighed heavily and reminded him that Yang's father wasn't a nobody, and that even the principal wouldn't anger him, meaning Zhang Shan would only suffer. He told him that every young man acted hot-blooded at some point, but he needed to understand when to hold back. He instructed him to write a self-criticism and behave from then on. Back in class, our MC walked into a wave of cheers that painted him like some schoolyard hero, the kind of badass everyone wanted to hype up. The girl he had saved moved toward him with relief, softening her features, grateful he was unharmed. Yet the scene only poured gasoline on Yang's lackey's raging ego. The guy simmered as he watched Zhang Shan steal the spotlight again, mumbling dark fantasies about choking down his jealousy and planning to gather a squad after school to see if Jiang Shan could take on 10 people at once. Yang, on the other hand, cooled down from his earlier stunt, deciding brute force was for lower creatures, and that real power belonged to those who understood the rules and knew exactly how to twist them. With that thought, he casually dialed his father's secretary, already plotting the cleanest way to shove someone into juvenile detention. Meanwhile, Lin Shi, the girl Zhang Shan had saved, approached like a goddess, stepping through the crowd of stunned boys. She handed him her father's card, offering gratitude on her family's behalf. The boy glanced down, spotting the name printed boldly alongside the insignia of the Eastern Theater Command, and his pulse stuttered. Lin Zhenbang was no small figure. He's one of the youngest major generals and a rising star whispered about even after stepping away from the core of power. Zhang Shan accepted the card and headed back to his seat with a calm that made his deskmate instantly lean in, radiating jealousy while making snarky assumptions about famous fathers and future son-in-law fantasies. Zhang Shan brushed it off, but the moment felt short-lived as Yang strolled over with smug satisfaction, claiming the principal wanted him in the office. The second he stepped inside, the principal jabbed a finger at him with the fury of someone who thought he had the upper hand, throwing accusations of half-murder as he waved a medical report in his face. Jiang Shan took one look at the so-called skull fracture and noted how the ink was practically still wet, instantly recognizing Yang Tianli's handiwork. He hadn't touched Han Chang's head during the fight, making the diagnosis complete bullshit. The principal grew louder, shoving the papers and insisting the evidence was undeniable, but Zhang Shan shut the man down with ice-cold precision, announcing he would head straight to the hospital to confirm the truth and reminding the principal that betting everything on Yang Tianli's father was a shaky move for someone who claimed to understand power. The blunt force of his words left the principal staggered, shocked that a student could corner him so easily. Before the tension could settle, 2 policemen burst into the office, declaring Zhang Shan a suspect of intentional assault and dragging him toward questioning. Yang followed the scene with a twisted smirk, fully convinced the game was already won. Our MC's gaze, however, only hardened as he was pushed into the interrogation room. One officer threw a confession form in front of him, demanding admissions, but Zhang Shan leaned back with a sneer and told them to check the transfer records in Han Chang's phone instead of wasting breath. He acknowledged the lack of cameras, the missing warrant, the absence of proper uniforms and identification, and the pathetic level of their procedure. The 2 officers, rattled by the boy's unnerving insight, exchanged looks as he demanded the presence of someone higher up who actually understood the rules. Their uneasy silence cracked when Police Chief Dong Li entered with a cold laugh, stating that rules didn't apply to everyone and that Zhang Shan's real mistake had been offending the wrong people. The chief pushed the confession aggressively, promising a shorter sentence if he cooperated. Zhang Shan evaluated him with a smirk sharp enough to cut, pointing out how desperately the man was sucking up to Yang Tianli's father, and predicting that such ambition would eventually shatter him until all that was left was blood and broken meat on the ground. The words hit like a blade, pushing the chief into a furious snarl as he grabbed the boy by the collar. Before he could unleash more rage, his subordinate rushed in with a trembling voice, reporting a call from the theater command headquarters. Zhang Shan leaned back with a quiet, satisfied look while the chief froze at the name, suddenly unsure whether answering was a mistake waiting to explode. With no escape, the chief picked up the call, only to be ordered to release Zhang Shan immediately. He tried to argue, but the office door burst open as He Changshan, Colonel Lin Zhenbang's trusted subordinate, marched inside with a glare sharp enough to slice the room in half. When the chief attempted to stand his ground under the shelter of procedure, He Changshan drew his pistol and pressed it against the chief's forehead, shutting every protest instantly. The chief had no choice but to retreat, scrambling into the interrogation room with He Changshan trailing behind him like a hammer waiting to drop. He babbled excuses, claiming nothing had happened, while He Changshan carved through his lies with a voice that felt like steel, accusing him of daring to touch someone under Colonel Lin's protection. The chief collapsed under the weight of his own fear, stammering that the whole thing was a misunderstanding, while Zhang Shan simply thought about how the timing was late but still perfect enough to save him. Before entering the principal's office, he had already slipped Lin Zhenbang's card to his deskmate with instructions to make the call if he didn't return quickly. The boy finally let out a breath of relief, knowing caution had saved him from Yang Tianli's trap. He Changshan produced official paperwork, forcing the chief to process the release properly, while the man cursed internally at how thoroughly the Yang family had slammed into an iron wall. The Lin family's influence in the capital was sky-high, and with the military backing the kid, Zhang Shan was clearly not just some ordinary student. The chief walked away with a grim realization that he would now have to find a way to salvage whatever remained of this broken relationship before it crushed him completely. Inside the car afterward, He Changshan studied Zhang Shan from the side, acknowledging the student's connection to the commander's family and thanking him for saving the daughter who meant everything to their household. Zhang Shan responded with quiet steadiness, remembering how Colonel Lin had once saved his life and deciding that their debts now balanced out. Changshan accepted that with a nod, though curiosity flickered across his face as he recalled the young miss praising the boy's skill and demanding a demonstration. Before the thought fully settled, he suddenly threw a punch, testing him with a sneaky swipe. Changshan instantly tensed, realizing the man was probing him, while Changshan feigned innocence with a shrug as he swung again. Changshan dodged effortlessly, slipping past the blows with the kind of reflexes that left the driver in the front seat muttering about an upcoming checkpoint. Changshan finally leaned back with a relieved sigh, grateful they avoided attracting attention because he had no desire to write a report about roughhousing with a prodigy in the back seat. The car eventually pulled over, and Changshan instructed Changshan to head inside where the commander waited upstairs. As the boy left, Changshan rotated his shoulder with an annoyed grimace, muttering that the kid's close-quarters combat felt insane for a high schooler. His subordinate snickered at the sight of the fresh bruises until Changshan snapped at him and demanded pain relief spray. Inside the office, Colonel Lin greeted our MC with calm authority and welcomed him properly. The boy responded with respectful composure, and the old man's expression turned heavy as he acknowledged the weight of the debt he owed. His daughter was his only family, and the thought of losing her tightened something deep inside him. Changshan's answer remained modest, built on a sense of decency rather than heroism. Lin respected the boy's courage, especially since he had stepped in front of an armed thug without hesitation. With that, he handed over a classified document and lowered his voice, explaining how Deputy District Chief Yang had grown too bold. He described the situation like a tree growing tangled branches, suggesting that some trimming would soon be necessary. He assured the boy that the suffering he endured today would not go unanswered, and that Yang and his son would not stay arrogant for long. Those words ignited recognition in Changshan's memory. In his previous life, Yang Tianli's father had indeed been taken down around this time, with 6 million in dirty money disappearing before resurfacing years later in an abandoned Yang estate. Lin noticed the shift in his expression and asked what occupied his thoughts, and the boy responded with a faint smile as he imagined the deputy chief's face if his house were robbed. The idea settled into his mind like a spark waiting to ignite. At 3 in the midnight, dressed in black with a bag slung across his back, Changshan crept toward his home's door with care. His mother lay asleep on the couch, and her sudden muttering froze him on the spot as she cursed father and son for staying out all night and swore she would break legs if they kept messing around. Realizing she was just sleep-talking, he exhaled and slipped out quietly. Soon he arrived at the Yang family villa. He examined the web of surveillance cameras surrounding the property, cursing under his breath at the density because it screamed corruption. After studying the angles carefully, he spotted a blind spot and prepared his entry. Setting the timer on his watch, he climbed onto a trash bin, vaulted upward, and flipped cleanly into the courtyard with one smooth motion. He remembered the reports mentioning money hidden inside a decorative ornament, but not the exact object. A stash that large needed something sturdy, and his eyes eventually landed on the fountain at the center. A fountain counted as decoration, and the fact that it was still running at midnight only added to the suspicion. Up close, he quickly confirmed something was concealed inside. Just then, a distant guard complained loudly about pointless night patrols, while lamenting that no one would dare steal from the deputy chief anyway. A splash suddenly echoed through the yard, prompting the guard to panic until he spotted a white cat staring back innocently. Muttering to himself, he turned away and continued his patrol. Only then did Changshan rise from the fountain, startling the cat so badly it nearly bolted. He inspected the hidden stash, realizing instantly why it had never been found. Finding it so quickly almost felt like fate had handed it to him. The 6 million was far more than he expected, and his backpack would never hold all of it. Scanning the courtyard, he spotted a handcart and quickly loaded the bundles onto it before pushing it away with a smirk tugging at his lips. The possibilities spun in his mind. Buying property, diving into crypto, riding the early waves of the internet era, all of it suddenly felt within reach. A car suddenly rolled past him and screeched to a halt in front. A heavily drunk Yang Tianli stumbled out, shouting nonsense about Changshan rotting in jail, and started kicking the cart like a spoiled bitch he is. He sneered at the boy in his drunken haze, calling him trash loader, before suddenly noticing the handcart carrying stacks of money instead of garbage. Confusion overtook him as he tried to process the sight, completely unaware that the boy had already slipped behind him. In one swift and efficient strike, the boy knocked him unconscious. He stood over the fallen brat with cold judgment, mentally listing the sins of underage driving, no license, and drunken stupidity, all wrapped into one pathetic package that proved his mother's words painfully true. With calm precision, he delivered 2 sharp kicks before pulling a kitchen knife from his bag. The brat wasn't worth killing, but he definitely deserved a lesson. Changshan lifted his head and carved a crude new hairstyle, leaving clumps of hair scattered as he worked. When he finished, he stretched his sore neck and stared at his handiwork. The new look felt fitting for someone who needed a reminder. With that done, he returned home quietly. The next morning, his mother knocked on his door. The the boy groaned, asking for 5 more minutes, only for her to threaten skipped breakfast before announcing her trip to the temple. She asked why the kitchen knife was covered in hair, why the foyer looked soaked, and why she sensed someone moving in and out of the house last night. She interrogated the half-asleep boy with relentless suspicion, scolding him for staying up too late yet again. Jiang Shan stared blankly, realizing his mother operated like some ultimate recon soldier who never missed a single detail, and he silently prayed she never picked up real evidence of the midnight chaos he caused. Over at the Yang Villa, a guard finishing his shift spotted a drunk body sprawled at the gate and kicked him out of irritation, annoyed that some idiot had passed out in the middle of the road at dawn. The drunk slurred angrily, and the guard froze when he recognized Yang Tianli beneath the messy hair and smeared grime. Tianli complained about the noise drilling into his skull and rubbed the back of his head, only to feel a strange prickling sensation. When he lowered his gaze, he saw clumps of his own hair scattered across the ground. Rage detonated through him as he staggered upright and wailed to anyone who could hear that he would make his father destroy whoever touched him. He swore his entire family would take revenge alongside Jiang Shan, whining like a spoiled brat as he ran home in angry tears. The moment he reached the doorway, he froze. 2 officials were escorting his handcuffed father out of the house. Tianli lunged toward them in panic, but the officers announced their authority as part of an anti-corruption bureau operation, informing him that his father was under investigation for serious misconduct. The color drained from Tianli's face as reality hit him. Someone nearby remarked that this time, even his father couldn't save him. Meanwhile, at school, Jiang Shan's deskmate shook him awake in a panic, babbling about the arrest that turned the city upside down. Jiang Shan barely reacted, giving a tired acknowledgement that left his classmate baffled. He simply stated that evil tended to destroy itself, and brushed off the excitement with clear indifference. His deskmate nagged him about looking exhausted and smelling damp, and Jiang Shan casually muttered that he had gone fishing, earning a warning that fishing was banned in Zhonghe and could get him in trouble. In his past life, the political storm triggered by this arrest had nearly swallowed the whole city, but this time the deputy chief fell slightly earlier than before. A small shift caused by his rebirth had clearly nudged the timeline, but he pushed the thought aside. He focused on the real issue of what to do with the 6 million he stole. His long-term goal was revenge, and the money had to move him closer to that. Still, 6 million wasn't enough to challenge someone like Qin Shao. He considered investing it, buying a building, becoming a landlord, anything that could grow the capital. A realistic plan for someone who had lived most of his life broke. Lost in thought, he walked toward an alley where several thugs were kicking a man to the ground. He shook his head at the sight, thinking about how the old district had turned into a hive for punks. He muttered that he would let them tire themselves out before passing through. Inside the alley, the thugs demanded money, while the beaten man begged them to stop. Jiang Shan recognized him as some bureau chief, surprised that even officials were now easy prey for street trash. One of the punks raised a steel pipe again, threatening to beat the man into submission. The victim collapsed motionless, and the thugs hesitated, unsure whether he was dead. One finally grit his teeth and lifted the pipe again. Before the blow landed, Jiang Shan lunged forward in one explosive movement, kicking the attacker so hard he flew backward. The fallen man lifted his head in shock, startled to find Jiang Shan standing over him. The boy eyed him with a smirk, recognizing Director Dong, and wondering how a man of his rank ended up groveling in a filthy alley like a rat. He hadn't expected such a respectable figure to be beaten by low-level thugs. Without hesitation, he quickly subdued the remaining punks. Director Dong stared up in disbelief and tried to compose himself before explaining that he was conducting undercover inspections in plain clothes, a claim Jiang Shan found ridiculous. He pulled the man to his feet and mocked the lack of awareness required for such work, commenting that even an emperor never traveled without guards. Dong quickly shifted the conversation, suggesting that Jiang Shan take the civil service exam and become his bodyguard, but the boy brushed off the idea and insisted he had business to discuss. Dong led him to his car to talk properly, muttering about how reckless kids lacked any sense of consequences, yet admitting that without the boy's intervention, he would have been finished. Jiang Shan countered that the old district needed serious cleanup, and Dong immediately agreed, mentioning General Lin's involvement and concern for local security. Jiang Shan continued, pointing out that Dong wanted to climb the ranks and that undercover work alone wouldn't get him anywhere. What Dong needed was real results. When the old man asked what he meant, Jiang Shan explained that he had a way to make money, but needed a trustworthy partner. The eastern block of the old district was scheduled for demolition soon, and Dong instantly understood that the boy was talking about getting in ahead of the redevelopment curve. Dong said it would require huge capital and strong connections, but Jiang Shan cut him off, stating that he had the money and could handle the connections. What he needed was someone who could deal with trouble from the inside and ensure everything ran clean. It depended on whether Director Dong wanted to earn himself a comfortable retirement Dong took a long moment to weigh the offer, then nodded and accepted the role, promising to treat Zhongshan like a nephew and handle whatever needed handling. Zhongshan answered with a smirk, sealing the partnership, while Dong wondered how the kid even knew about the demolition plan. The old man muttered that the boy was a sly one, realizing he might have underestimated him from the start.